Hey everyone, yeah, welcome back. Good to see you again. You're looking well. Get yourself a seat up front. We're going to get started. Because, yes, there's a show. It's all been happening, and now you want to know. But before we can start, we must begin with a hello. My name is Sean, your host and fellow. Now grab hold your beverage, your mind just as quick. We're building up for our best sip. So join me now for the greatest pleasure, where we unwind this world together. It's time now. It's time for the sip. Let's do it now. Let's do it quick. Go! Ah, absolutely splendid. Well, a 41-year-old woman named Erin Elizabeth Sutton decided it was a great idea to go for a swim naked in her neighbour's pond in Marion. When police showed up after the trespassing call, she refused to get out, telling officers she was trying to be a mermaid. She eventually climbed out, still fully nude, but things escalated fast. Medics tried to get her inside because it was cold, and she suddenly charged at a deputy, kicking and punching him. Cops had to tase her to get things under control. She was taken to hospital, later surrendered under warrant, and faced charges including resisting with force, battery on an officer, and public intimidation. After an ordeal like that, though, she was probably feeling like a fried fish out of water. So I missed yesterday's episode, more on that later, but let me do a quick catch-up of where we are with the King in the US. On Tuesday, the formal state arrival ceremony took place in the White House South Lawn with a full military honours, 21-gun salute, parade, and remarks. There were bilateral meetings between Trump and Charles in the Oval Office and separate meetings for Melania and Camilla. King Charles addressed a joint session of Congress, who was who's only the second British monarch to do so, after his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, in 1991. He emphasised the UK-US special relationship, alliances, shared history, and the 250th anniversary of the US independence from Britain. He received multiple standing ovations during the speech. State dinner at the White House in the evening with warm toasts, quips between Trump and Charles, and symbolic emphasis on enduring relationship amid tensions, for example, over Iran. Trump called the UK America's closest friend, and Charles spoke of an indispensable alliance. Then on Wednesday, which was yesterday, the King and Queen Camilla are in New York City for the day. The main events were the visit to the 9/11 Memorial Museum and at the One World Trade Center, meeting the first responders and victims' families, community projects in Harlem, a New York Public Library event for Queen Camilla, and other cultural and business receptions. Then today, the couple returns to the Washington, D.C. area with events in Virginia focused on the environmental national parks, cultural performances, and a community block party tied to the 250th anniversary. The King and Trump have scheduled a formal farewell in the South Portico and diplomatic reception rooms for later in the day. Then the visit concludes, and then the royal couple are headed to Bermuda after that. So over in Japan, this one is from Ground News. Japan Airlines are testing humanoid robots for airport baggage handling. Japan Airlines will begin a 2-year trial next month at Tokyo's Haneda Airport in using Chinese-made humanoid robots for cargo and baggage handling tasks. The airline currently employs 4,000 ground handling staff and plans to expand robot duties to cabin cleaning for 2028. Japan's aviation industry faces severe labour shortages from an ageing population and surging tourism. Over 7 million visitors arrived in just the first 2 months of this year, which is a pretty staggering amount of people. The robot aims to reduce physical strain on workers handling heavy luggage in extreme weather, though they currently operate only 2 to 3 hours before recharging. So no surprises with the story then. While there will be some uses for the robots in baggage handling, I think they're just a little bit too slow at the moment to perform any real-world use on live planes going through. Possibly with cargo, if you can throw a few of them at it, there'll be some first uses there, but probably on smaller, unimportant items that aren't time critical. They can take a few hours to get on the plane. I think that's the kind of task that they'll be focused on. With the regular planes, the turnaround time will have to be much quicker than that. People aren't going to wait for their baggage. If it's going to take a robot, 4 or 5 times longer, it's not going to really work. So. Meanwhile, the press freedom worldwide is at its lowest level in 25 years, a watchdog group warns. In its annual index, RSF warns that the press freedom has reached its lowest level in 25 years, with an average score that, with all countries studied, that has never been so low. The proportion of global population living in countries with good press freedom rating has plummeted from 20% to less than 1%, with only 7 nations in Northern Europe, led by Norway, maintaining this high standard. Dropping 7 places to 64th, the United States received a problematic rating between Botswana and Panama. While the NGO described President Donald Trump's attacks on the press as systematic, citing journalist Mario Guevara's detention. This is an interesting story because it comes all the way down to what defines freedom of speech and what regular controls are in place that they try and measure to see how it's being manipulated. The index seems fairly comprehensive, but there are some things that aren't taken into account at the moment. And some of that is things like self-censorship. Multiple studies and journalist accounts note that many mainstream journalists in Sweden avoid or soften coverage related to immigration challenges, crime links, the integration failures, the cultural clashes and costs, and often for years. The reasons often include things like being the fear of being called a racist. So I don't know how that keeps your press impartial and independent, and able to look at something as a whole problem, cohesively as one thing. There is some other historical context. During the 2015 migrant influx peak, mainstream media often emphasized the positive angles and humanitarian stories rather than downplaying the problems. Police and authorities were accused of underreporting and avoiding ethnic patterns in crime stats. And again, it's if you're only going to say good things and never mention the bad things, then it's not really that balanced or honest media either, is it? Leaving things out is just as bad as saying the wrong things often. So certainly there seems to be a case for Sweden. I remember reading about the stats for a number of bombings that have happened in Sweden, which has just seen a staggering rise in the last 15 years. I think it was like there were hundreds of bombings in the last 20 years versus maybe 20 in the prior 40, 50 years before that. It was some really crazy stat like that. Something's happened in the last 15 years, basically. Meanwhile, in the UK, Parliament has voted against an inquiry into PM Starmer over Mandelson. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer avoided a parliamentary investigation into claims he mishandled Parliament or misled Parliament over Lord Peter Mandelson's appointment as ambassador, after MPs rejected the Conservative motion 335 to 223. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch accused the Prime Minister of misleading Parliament by claiming full due process occurred and no pressure existed regarding Lord Mandelson, though some Labour figures branded the call a political stunt. Former Foreign Mandarin Sir Philip Barton told the Foreign Affairs Committee it was unusual to announce the appointment before vetting, while Morgan McSweeney denied he did ask officials to ignore procedures during his testimony. Labour MPs were ordered to oppose the motion, yet a handful of backbenchers criticised the government for whipping the vote, suggesting the Prime Minister should refer himself to the Privileges Committee to clear his name. So Labour forced the vote by explicitly telling MPs which way they had to vote, and that's, to me, seems like a system trying to protect itself from being exposed. So the result's not really that shocking, I guess. It does show they are nervous about the dissatisfaction that their Mandelson pick has in their own party, so I'm sure this is not going to be the end of it. I'm sure there'll be a few more bites of the cherry, if we can put it like that. And then finally, I missed yesterday's video. I know I said I wanted to keep up the momentum, and embarrassingly, the very next day, I didn't put one out. So maybe I jinxed it. Maybe I was just being a little too ambitious. Maybe I didn't plan well enough. Probably a combination of all of those things. I did have some parts of the script done, but there was just a few gaps. I'm not sure how I actually made it to the airport, given how tired I was. As you can see, I'm in a new setting now. So the good news is that the first part of the first part of the movie is done. So we can spend a little bit more time focusing on you guys now. But that brings me to the close and to my final message. And the final message is all about consistency. Did you guess that one? Anyway, if you want to make progress to achieve a goal, then the main thing it requires is taking this some kind of regular, consistent action. As Scott Adams would say, systems over goals. Repetition builds the bridge to reach your goal. And with that, I will bid you well, and I will say, see you later. Cheers.